Welcome to Spoilerin Time, folks. This is the show where Brian Brushwood and myself, Tom Merritt, will discuss shows we've been watching thanks to all of the great technology we talk about on Cordkillers. And this week, we'll be discussing the 4th episode of Season 2 of Deadwood, Season 2, Episode 1 of Legion. And, Brian, what are we going to start with?
You know we got to start with that summer movie draft. Come on. Tom.
Wow.
Thomas.
Cordkillers. Team Cordkillers. Not quiet about A Quiet Place.
Tom.
$50 million, Brian.
They spent $24 for A Quiet Place. Only
now remember,
$5.
I think they spent $24 because it was near the end, and they just like spent all their money because they knew they weren't going to be able to spend it otherwise.
Turns out, pretty good investment.
I know.
Because A Quiet Place just knocked Ready Player One from the first place spot. We thought Blockers was going to be, it was tracking really, really huge with positive numbers. Blockers only did $20 million, and that would have been a huge coup for Night Attack. But we are looking at Team Night Attack with the first 3 movies of the draft, all 3 underperforming our expectations. Meanwhile, Cordkillers overpaying for A Quiet Place, and it ended up looking like a fantastic buy at what they got for it.
This is why they put the movies in the theaters, Brian, so that we can actually have people spend their money on it and it show up in our spreadsheet.
Thank you, Hollywood. It's very convenient for our game that you decide to keep showing up.
No, seriously, like, you know, yeah, you can Monday morning quarterback all day long. Oh, I'm not even sure how that applies here, but the fact of the matter is, A Quiet Place almost matched Ready Player One's opening weekend, and it's the kind of movie, I may be wrong about this, but it's the kind of movie where people are like, oh, wait, so I heard it's good. Is it actually good? Maybe I'll see it, where it might not lose its audience as fast in the second week because not everybody who's interested in seeing it would have rushed out to see it like they would with Ready Player One. Although Ready Player One didn't do bad. I mean, $96 million after 2 weeks. That's not shabby.
I mean, nobody's shedding a tear for Steven Spielberg and our friend Ernest Cline. But I will say that A Quiet Place, I am that target demographic you were talking about. I still don't know what it's about. All I know is John Krasinski, and it overperformed expectations, and that it's got a high Rotten Tomatoes thing. That's what they call it, right? The rotten. They have a big fat Rotten Tomato.
Rotten Tomatoes. I will double check, but I believe it's just the high Rotten Tomatoes thing. Correct.
So tell me this: is it something I should go see, not knowing anything about? Should I take my wife, who does not like suspenseful, scary things? Should I go see it by myself?
I wouldn't take Bonnie if she.
So it's similar to Annihilation. I should just go see it myself.
Eileen doesn't like scary movies. She doesn't like Paranormal Activity, stuff like that. She liked this, and she came out of the theater saying it was a monster movie.
Right. Not
a little bit suspenseful, but she's like, it was a monster movie, not a horror film. And I'm like, well, a monster movie is technically a subgenre of horror, but
it's not gory or tortury in the way that you might think of the word of a horror movie.
Well, compare it to Annihilation real quick for me.
I think they're very different. I don't see Annihilation as horror. I think
I thought it was suspenseful.
It is suspenseful.
Yeah. It's not
John Krasinski has been saying in all of his interviews, like, it's fine to know the premise going in. You will. In fact, he's like, I think you enjoy it better if you know the premise because you don't know how it's going to play out. He's like, the premise is not the key thing here.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. You can go in. I've seen the trailers a bunch of times in front of the various movies, and I walked in knowing about the conceit, but I feel like I was not spoiled when it started.
Unlike Get Out, where you pretty much got an outline of the entire movie.
Thankfully, I didn't see that really awful Get Out trailer. Yeah.
I still think Brian might, because you like surprises so much, you might like not knowing anything if you don't find out. But if you do find out, I don't think.
Okay, well, if we're agreed that I shouldn't try to drag Bonnie to it and I should just go see it by myself, maybe I'll do that.
Yeah.
If for no other reason than a very early scene in the movie that I know Bonnie's not going to like.
Okay, all right.
Oh, God, yes.
That's all the confirmation I needed. Thank you, gentlemen.
All right, let's move on to talk about Legion, or as Brian called it, did I dream that?
Yeah, we were in the break. We were talking about the fact that we went to Orlando for a wedding over the weekend, and we decided to wrap up the night because they were doing a free preview on FX's site for Legion Season 2, Episode 1. And it was the end of the evening, and Bonnie insists that I snored through half of it. However, I woke up the next day. I'm like, man, I don't know which parts of that were real, which I dreamed. So I rewatched almost the entire thing, and then was left with the conclusion of like, nope, I watched it. I watched all of that. That was me being awake watching that fever dream.
I think this season more so than the first is going to require binge watching to really help. I actually caught up on Legion in the first season, and I probably should have done the reverse. We're like watched it from the beginning last season and waited on this season, because what I loved about season 1 was it starts with a fairly acceptable premise, right? And then you slowly learn that the world is not what it seems. Well, they can't pull that trick off because all of season 1 was about the world is not what it seems. However, I thought from the promos that maybe they were going to try. Maybe we were going to try to convince you that season 1 didn't happen. But instead, we just start by saying, okay, we've got David back, and it's going to be as trippy, if not trippier, than the trippiest moments of last season. And you're going to have to really pay attention if you want to extract any kind of narrative out of this.
So in that regard, let me just say, let's start with the most messed up part is how trippy the ending was, where we had a dance battle between 3 entities wrestling for control in some kind of,
I mean, honestly,
undefined.
That was one of the more sensible parts for me. We're like, okay, so they're having a dance battle in a club. I guess dancing in a club makes sense. I'm going to hang on to that.
So to me, I read that whole sequence as there are not, okay. So imagine the battle of 3 conscious entities wrestling for control or dominance in some kind of situation. If we use words to describe it, we're already taking something and translating it to something else to express it. And whatever we say will be a poor facsimile of the epic battle of consciousness that occurred. This is just translating it instead of to a verbal place, a kinesthetic place, and using visual imagery to, in the chaos of it, what might be a dance club, what might be the tumultuous thoughts of a conscious mind. We see these different entities and they're, I don't know, sub-lieutenants or whatever, fighting against each other for dominance. And I could buy all of that. What was challenging for me, number one, God, dog, is this a gorgeous show? It's so gorgeous,
so beautiful. Yeah.
From beginning to end. It is. I
100%
gorgeous.
Agree with you. That was one thing in my most confused moments. I kept consoling myself like, but damn, ain't it pretty?
Yeah. Well, and what's funny is I took a peek. I don't normally do this, but it was so challenging of a first episode that I peeked around to see kind of what the other people had in their reviews, and I saw some really trite stuff like, what's this cafeteria with boats with waffles and there's nobody there? Who's putting food on these boats? I'm like, shut up, jerk.
Really? That's the thing that bothered you?
Yeah, shut up. Because very clearly what they're doing is they're ripping on, the sushi joints that have the conveyor belts and you grab whatever you want and all that stuff. I loved everything visually about this. I tolerated the very flat on the nose. Okay, so new set of rules. What you thought the show was about is no longer what it's about. Now we're working with the bad guys, or at least one of the bad guys. We're not sure who's the good guy and the bad guy. And let me just, set the rules for this. Also, let's break the rules in the last 5 minutes of the episode by having the main character say, but also you should totally try to find the bad guy.
Yeah. I actually loved using the GLaDOS voice with the mustachioed women. I have no idea.
So weird.
It's
so weird.
That's the kind of thing that's kind of like the dancing, right? It just sets a mood and you don't want to try to interpret it too literally. It's like, okay, I get it. This is going to be weird, otherworldly communication. I was following the idea that, David was captured. David somehow they found, I believe they actually found him in a club where people had the chattering disease happen to them. And he somehow has figured it out, but can't remember. So I'm like, oh, okay. So we're going to go on a journey to recover his memories, which I imagine we'll still do. But like you said, they spent a lot of time setting up like he's going to try to find his body. So we're going to race Lenny to find her body, his body, whatever. And we need to do that. And then immediately turn that around and like, help Lenny find the body. And you're like, well, now is this really Sid or is this David's mind messing with him? Is it Lenny inside of him still? Is Lenny actually in him secretly? And we don't know that. Like, those are all good questions, I guess, right? Because it's got me wondering.
Did they effectively resolve last season whether or not they sort of implied that Lenny was just another face of the what's his name King,
the Shadow King,
the Shadow King,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And so if that's the case, the mere fact, like, I understand Oliver and Lenny. Actually, I don't understand Lenny being prisoner of the Shadow King. If there's a lot I don't
Lenny
understand
anymore. We should call her the Shadow King. And whenever we see Aubrey Plaza, that's the actual spirit of the Shadow King.
But
who they're calling Farouk.
Farouk. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's Farouk.
But at
and
the beginning
Farouk
of this
is
episode,
inside Jermaine Clement from Flight of the Conchords.
Right, but the opening scene, then help me parse the opening scene where we have Jermaine Clement and Farouk sitting in a pool saying we're both prisoners.
Right.
I took that to be
on the astral plane where he used to be.
Well,
but maybe they're prisoners inside David.
But
see, in that scene ends with that transition out from like through the eye. So it's them and you go through the eye and it's the guy drinking tea in front of the Eiffel Tower. And then that goes out to Jermaine Clement's body. So maybe there is an intermediary level inside Jermaine.
Oh boy.
I'll tell you what, it is a good thing that who's the guy that did the same guy that did Fargo? Noah Hawley?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That sounds right.
I'm glad that Noah Hawley has so much credit in the Bank to Brushwood, because otherwise I might be tempted to jump off. But it's so gorgeous and it's so bizarre. I'm going to stay on board. It's going to take an awful lot to shake me from loving this show, but I will flatly say I got no idea what's going on. And also, you notice that David's girlfriend showed up with one arm at the end for no apparent reason.
Oh, she was missing an arm in that scene?
Yeah. And what's funny is I didn't notice it the first time. Second time, it's fairly obvious that I was surprised that I didn't notice it the first time.
In the orb or on the bed?
When she's painting with her hand.
Future. Okay, so in the orb.
Yeah.
Oh,
Future her.
That.
Yeah.
So this reminds me of one time in high school band when me and the other percussionists were having an offbeat battle, right? And it was like, who can play the like sickest offbeat? And I played something and everyone looked at me and said, we can't tell if that was total shit or the baddest ass offbeat ever. And that's how I feel about this episode, right? Like, I'm like, it's either genius or it's just utter nonsense. And I can't get
and actually, that's a good example, because the only way to know whether or not it was the baddest ass offbeat ever or total crap was if you could do it again. So, because if we keep seeing this week after week after week, and a meta narrative starts to emerge that we can sink our talons into, I think we're going to be pretty excited.
Yeah, you have to know what the written music looks like to be able to tell. Right?
I will say that, what's the old phrase? Familiarity breeds contempt. I was bummed with the Gladys voices just because I'm familiar with that trick. I've seen that trick before, and
but I like the sound of it so much.
That's fine. That's fine. Man, wild stuff. Basket Head, what a character. Definitely just a guy walking around with a basket on his head. And I love the fact that David is eating a waffle saying, is there a guy with a basket on his head? That
was a nice outlet. There were a few times where David said what we were thinking for us, which is good. I like that. All right. Any other thoughts on Legion?
Real quick, rank this I almost feel like it's not fair to rank this compared to anything from the first season because it's so odd and I don't know to what purpose yet. And I feel like I want to give a stay of judgment until I know what it is they're going for.
What did you guys think about John Hamm?
Oh, he was just the narrator voice?
The narrator, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, did they go out of his...
That didn't bother me, but Eileen immediately is like, does John Hamm need to be in everything now? It's starting to bother me.
I definitely like remembered like how much I've seen of John Hamm lately, but that was a fun moment. We were talking about on the main the primary target for Cordkillers today about Westworld and possibly putting out this spoilery video about
by the way, they're at 967 right now.
I feel like I would have liked to watch that for Legion before watching this episode because this feels like a show that's really deep and really like full of clues. And I know I haven't gone back and rewatched season 1.
Oh my gosh, you're so right. Like I can imagine a 2-minute video.
I'm not going to go back and look at all these clues and all these little associations. I think.
But if there was a video from Noah Hawley saying, "All right, look, the first 4 episodes are going to make no sense, but you're going to catch little themes that link together. Look for this theme, look for that theme, look for the other thing. They'll all tie together in episode 5. Then season 7, we're going to have a big surprise. There's going to be a big battle. So-and-so is going to win, but you're going to think that I don't know.
I mean, I'd go all the way and just give me the whole, give me the twist at the beginning. Cause there's something you said, Tom, about being able to read the text of the show better from knowing the end. And this is one of those very heavy shows with a lot of clues, and a lot of theories, and a lot of ties. And I would like that.
It's a massive theme park, and they're like, just go explore. You don't need a map.
You're like, am I doing it wrong? I'm riding a ride. I don't know what's going on.
Which way am I looking? One last thing. I wonder if this is going to be a tradition of ending the first episode of every season with one bad CGI effect.
What was the bad CGI effect this time?
Where they do the spin around of him in the club, and then they like superimpose him looking over Sid's body as she's sleeping, and he's very clearly like pasted into the door frame here so that it can be one continuous movement. But it's sometimes Legion has a history of good effects and bad effects.
Yep.
And that was like in an episode with a lot of big good effects, one really noticeable bad one.
I did not notice it, but I'll have to go back and watch that.
And it could be the way this monitors are set up, but I was like, oh, you can really tell that they faked this bit of lighting and this they didn't merge him well into this scene.
Gotcha. But all right. Well, let's move on to Deadwood. Season 2, episode 4. Hey, Al Swearingen finally passed the stones.
Hey, Tom, can I confess something? When it was time for me to watch this, I went and clicked start, and then as it's playing the Deadwood opening thing on HBO Now, I was like, oh, what's going to happen this episode, which I normally don't do. I read the description of the episode, and the description was for last week's episode. It said... Al Swearingen's really having trouble with stones. Here, actually, if you set this up, let me read to you what the summary is, and you can see. Actually, it's on IMDb. I read it and I thought, well, that can't be what happens this episode. That's what happened last episode, and sure enough, that was exactly what this episode was. So wait,
you were reading this episode's description and thought you were reading last episode?
Yes, because it's the exact same thing. Here. Let me read it to you and tell me if it sounds like last week's thing. All right, there we go. Season 2, episode 4. Doc contemplates a procedure that could cure Swearingen or kill him. Bullock attempts to settle into domesticity, while Saul gets a new bookkeeper, Trixie. Every one of these were in the previous episode.
The only one that's a giveaway is that like the Trixie thing is a reveal last week. And it's just a continuation this week.
Correct.
So you would put that in the episode description unless you already knew it.
Alma cuts ties with Sophia's tutor, Miss Singerhausen.
I know. How many weeks are we going to cut ties with that tutor, by the way?
I don't know.
Why does she know the guy from the island, from Lost? And why would she, like, it's very obvious that she's like, well, I'm risking my reputation being here, but give me some whiskey. Like, At first I thought, oh, there's a secret connection between these two. They've been plotting and Alma's caught to it. That's why it's happened. And then it turns out she's like, no, I don't know you at all. But I just, I'm really distraught over getting fired.
Hey, Tom, and finally, there's rumors about the camp's future in legal ownership of the gold claims.
Yeah, that's pretty telling because those all are appropriately true of both last week and this week's episode. Now, granted, we made progress in those storylines, but we didn't move on from any of them. They didn't evolve or change. They just moved down the same track. Like, I actually thought it was quite cute the way they had Seth and his brother's wife decide to have sex. That was that was very 19th century. I thought it was fine. I thought it was entertaining.
Sure,
but.
Not as much progression.
Major development, right? Is like, oh, okay, they've reunited, but we didn't have any kind of movement forward other than actually, you know what? Alma's foreman backing down, knowing the guy who came from her.
Mr. W. Yeah, no, that was great.
Backing him down. That was pretty awesome. I love that.
That was great. The fact that it made me respect him. What started off looking like such a cartoon character at the beginning of season 1, where you thought his whole role was just to be somebody who was going to be killed for the crime of having seen Dan kill the now widow's husband, instead turns out to be sophisticated, to know his business, and be capable of running this giant burgeoning empire, and of knowing a snake when he sees it, and pulling out this backstory, placing his hand on his revolver and just staring down the devil himself, or at least the devil's henchman. I love that. I thought that was great.
Also, they really built up this idea that the devil's henchman was going to harm this woman who had been imported particularly for him. That storyline, I'm sure I'm missing something, is just confusing as hell to me. I don't know why being with him last week was such a big deal to the Borg Queen. I don't.
Oh, is that who that was? That is the Borg Queen. I didn't realize that.
I don't understand why we were built up to think he was going to abuse her, and then he just wants to chat with her. Like, I guess another shoe's going to drop next week. I don't know. I'm very confused. Very confused by either the fact that we haven't progressed farther in some storylines or why certain storylines are happening at all.
Here's what I'm afraid of. And I'm afraid of the same thing for what we're seeing with Legion. Both Deadwood and Legion have something in common with one of my favorite series of all time, Battlestar Galactica, in that all of season 1 of Battlestar Galactica held nothing back. They're like, we're going to go full out. We got nothing to lose. We have no guarantee of coming back for season 2. Let's just do everything, make every promise go as hard as we can. And we saw that in Legion, and we saw that in Deadwood. And the best season of science fiction is season 1 of Battlestar. The worst is season 2, when suddenly they're like, whoa, let's slow things down. We got 7 more seasons of this to go if we're lucky. Let's get some more threads going. And
the worst is that we know Deadwood doesn't have that many seasons.
Exactly, right? And we don't know yet whether Legion will. And to see both of them, am I crazy for thinking this? Does that resonate with you?
I think you're right. I think it's an apt comparison, particularly with Deadwood. I think it's too early to tell with Legion, but I see what you're saying about it. Hopefully it'll prove us wrong in the next couple of weeks. Deadwood, 4 episodes in, it's like, no, you're definitely kind of wandering here. I wonder, as you were talking about that, I started to realize we haven't had Al Swearingen, who is the guy who says, enough of this bullshit, let's move on. Let's sugar it off the pot. Let's actually chamber pot, to be period accurate. Let's make stuff happen. He's been lying on the floor for a couple episodes. Maybe that's part of the problem.
Yeah,
is that we need that character to be in action to move things
He's
forward.
The muscle that keeps the story moving forward, which, by the way, favorite part of this episode is just that long lingering shot at his faces, and he goes,
yeah.
Like, that was how I felt as a viewer. Like, great, we're done with this. We're all done. We're done with the horror show. We're done with the scary story. We're ready to get back to what we love about Deadwood and go.
Yeah, let's get Al back on his. I did have a tear in my eye over an avoided bladder surgery, which I don't think I ever would have said. But man, with the joy that the doctor felt when he didn't have to kill a man,
well,
like he knew.
He said, "You saved me. You saved me," and I believed it. Doc is the best character in the entire show. He's better than Al Swearingen.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely, because that was all about Doc knowing, and he's like. 2 in 10 with somebody who's really good. And let's be honest, I'm okay, but I'm not that good. So he's gonna die, and I'm not gonna be able to live with it. It'll be one too many. That was epic. That little section there.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Well, thank you for supporting us. You patrons are already getting this a little bit ahead of everybody else. But spread the word. And if you're not a patron and you would like to support the fact that we're doing this and even get a sneak peek, get this a little earlier, go to patreon.com/Cordkillers.
Yeah, just like Tom said, if you're a patron, spread the word. If you're not a patron, you shut your filthy mouth. You don't tell anyone about this show. This is our secret.
Until you become a patron. Then
right.
You can tell.
Then you can tell everyone.
We'll talk to you next week.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.